All right, so we are now in topic 2. This unit, or this part of our unit, looks at different economic systems, different ways some countries operate their economies. So this particular one looks more at the market economy. We'll get more into that shortly. So basically some enduring understandings to keep in mind throughout this unit. So societies answer the key economic questions: what to produce, how to produce it, and for whom to produce it. They answer all those questions differently. So because of that, multiple economic decisions are made, multiple economic systems have developed all around the world. Competition, for the most part, helps regulate these markets within these economies. And for the sake of clarity, the term market is not, don't think of like a farmer's market necessarily or anything like that. The term market refers to the whole system of buying and selling within an economy. So competition helps regulate these markets and helps give producers incentives to make what consumers want, to provide the goods and services that are desired by consumers, by us, the buyers. So because pure market and pure centrally planned economies have drawbacks, and we'll get into that in other lessons, a lot of nations tend to have what's called mixed economies, which will get explained later. Under our system, the free enterprise system is also called the free market system, and we'll get into a little more of what our system is and how it works. The government preserves economic freedoms, decision-making, things like that, while also looking out for the public interest, protecting the public interest through some regulation, limited, more limited in some situations than others, but regulation of the economy. So again, looking into 3 basic economic questions and how economic systems go to answer those questions. So we're going to look at identifying those questions that all societies, no matter if they're socialist, communist, dictatorship, or democratic, how those 3 questions are answered. The goals that determine how society answers those questions, and we're going to look into characteristics of a traditional economy in this lesson. So again, here's the 3 economic questions: what, for whom, and how to produce. Those are 3 basic economic questions of economics. So answering the questions, how a society, how an economic system answers those questions determines what type of economic system that's going to be. Structure, methods, principles society uses to produce and distribute goods and services. So again, whether it's socialist, capitalist, communist, whatever, mixed, every economic system has to answer those questions. So society often answers how the goods and services are consumed, largely answered on how society distributes income, how people get their money. You got factor payments and profits. Factor payments, it says here, it's income you get in return for supplying factors of production. Factor payments is basically your paycheck. Also may include profits, which is the amount of money a business or an individual receives in excess of expenses. And we'll get into that again later and in person. So most economic goals in the U.S. and around the world are growth, efficiency, equitable distribution of income, economic freedom, and economic security. And you can see what all those mean here on the screen, and we'll get into more of those in class. But there's some conflicts sometimes. For instance, a nation that wants to provide safety for all their citizens, some kind of safety net, Social Security, for example, may be faced with slow economic growth because of the added cost of those programs. Remember, there's no such thing as a free lunch. Nothing's free. So these protections that governments put in place sometimes, they cost. All nations, therefore, all systems, have to prioritize their goals. They have to arrange them in order of importance, make the most important decisions first. Sometimes those are tough decisions, but they have to be made. So let's look at one of these economies, a traditional economy. Basically with this, all the resources are allocated. This system is based on ritual, habit, customs, sometimes revolves around the family unit, often some extended families of several generations. Roles in these systems are defined by the customs of elders and ancestors. You don't see this very often around the world, but it still is found in some remote locations, communities that stay relatively small and close. Agriculture, farming, hunting practices are usually at the center of people's lives, laws, religious beliefs. You saw this a lot with more tribal groups in the past, things like that. So there's some pros and cons of traditional economy, just like anything else. Pros: You know what role you play. It's based on custom. There's not a whole lot of uncertainty as to how to produce or even what to produce or who's going to produce it, who it's going to be produced for. Again, it's all based on custom. Some drawbacks, some cons. Not a whole lot of new ideas. You won't get a whole lot of new when everything's based on tradition. Strict rules often punish people who act differently, and you sometimes get a lack of progress, which can lead to a low standard of living. We'll get into that more later. So markets, again, I already explained what a market is. Where buying and selling takes place, and it can look like different things. Essentially allow us to exchange what we want or exchange what we have for what we want. Most people in society are no longer self-sufficient. We usually specialize in a few specific goods or services that we use to exchange for the things we want. So specialization, you get kind of a focus there on productive efforts of individuals. Some people specialize in one area or another. Businesses are no different. And so there's a limited number of activities taking place there. Market economy. This is going to sound a little more familiar to you. People and firms, businesses, act in their own best interest to answer the three questions. Buyers and sellers are able to come together, exchange goods and services, do business. Consumers essentially cast their vote for which products should be made by spending their dollars. We'll discuss in class how dollars are like votes. You buying a product or a service, paying for it, is essentially a stamp of approval for that product. Most economies in the world operate based on the ideas of market economies. In general, free enterprise, free market, capitalism, they're all synonyms for this type of system. Households and firms. And firms, again, refer to businesses. In this system, the factors of production, along with goods and services, are exchanged, consumed, purchased, owned by households and between households and firms. Households, it's a person or a group of people living in a single residence. It's a family. It's a group of people living in a house. Firms, again, are businesses. The relationship between these two groups can be seen in this circular flow model. You can kind of follow each side spends money or sends resources back and forth to the other, and you get a circular flow model of a market economy. We'll dig deeper into this in class. So how do these work? Adam Smith, father of economics, basically, he said competition and our own self-interest actually keep the marketplace functioning. Competition's good. Our own self-interest is good. It keeps us buying products and services, keeps the economy moving forward. He wrote a book called The Wealth of Nations. Said that basically an economy is made up of countless individual transactions. Each of these exchanges is where the buyer and seller act in their own self-interest. Consumers are always pursuing their self-interest. They have the incentive to look for lower prices. That's demand. We'll get into that in another unit. And businesses are looking out for their own self-interest by increasing supply, increasing sales. Again, we'll get more into supply and demand in a later unit. So the struggle between producers for dollars for your business is competition. Competition is good. While self-interest is the motivating force behind the free market, competition is what regulates that force. The more competition, the better it is for consumers. You're going to have more options for lower prices and better products. That's always a good thing. Mostly the regulation of the market by these two forces happens without any central planning. Government doesn't have to do a whole lot. No consumer or producer has made decisions based on what's good for the marketplace, but the end result is a marketplace that's operating at the most efficient manner. Adam Smith referred to this as the invisible hand. Kind of just happens. Some advantages. They can adjust to change over time, these market economies. There's a high degree of individual freedom. Not a whole lot of government interference usually. Decision-making does not take place from the government most of the time. Businesses and individuals are able to make their own decisions. That's that individual freedom. A lot of variety and a lot of satisfaction. Got more options. Some disadvantages. Not everybody's basic needs are provided for. There's not enough sometimes of the services people value highly. So the government's got to put some in place like military protection, police, fire, education, things like that. And there's a relatively high degree of uncertainty faced by workers and businesses as a result of change. If a business moves or shuts down, people can lose their jobs. Also, it can fail if three conditions are not met. They've got to be reasonably competitive. Without competition, you end up with monopoly, and we'll get into that later. Resources have to be reasonably free to move from one activity to another. People have to have options to be able to move resources around. Businesses have to be able to change decisions, make changes necessary to keep moving forward. things like that. And consumers, the buyers, have to have access to adequate information, allow them to weigh alternatives, information, labels, reviews, things like that we're all familiar with, to help you make decisions. So that's it for this unit, or this part of this unit, excuse me. In the next units, we'll get into other systems, other economic systems, and how different countries may make some of these decisions and answer those three basic questions. So again, we'll get more into some of this stuff in class, and we'll do some assignments and other activities to practice some of this stuff to help you gain understanding. So good luck, and I'll see you next time.